I came into professional hockey as a 24-year-old rookie. So I kind of knew that unless my first year went really, really well, it's like, I'm not going to play in the NHL. I just wanted to keep playing the game that I love, the highest level I could. And it wasn't about playing in the NHL at that point. It was about continuing to do what I love and using it as an opportunity to build experiences. And why would you do something if you're not going to try to be the best at it? It's
Right.
like, hey, if I'm doing business, I'm not going to do it just to own, one rental house. Like, I want to own 1,000, or I want to own 10,000 units as opposed to, one. It's like, if you're going to do something, you got to go hard at it.
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to another episode of Weiss Advice. I am your host, Yona Weiss. Grateful to be here today with another incredible guest. We got Zane Schartz, all the way from Texas. How you doing, my friend?
Howdy.
Howdy.
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. Glad to be on and excited.
I am grateful, like I said earlier, to have you on the show. And it's been a long time coming. Like we were talking before the show. I mean, we've been working with you and your firm for probably like 5 years, 6 years almost. And first time we're actually face-to-face on a Zoom, but we've communicated so much. And it's just been a pleasure working with you. I thought you got so much going on. I'd love to hear your backstory and learn, who is Zane Schartz and what are you working on? So before we jump into it, if you give us a little bit of a background, how you got your start in real estate.
Yeah, sure. So I started about 6 years ago, started as a summer intern in college at Wolfe Investments, and Kenny Wolfe is the president here. And, I worked for them that summer. I worked for them throughout college, doing some underwritings, analysis. And then we also own a property management company, Allied Property Management, where in college, I worked for them doing all the pro formas. So I really was able to learn kind of the multifamily underwriting side of what it looks like for analyzing a deal. And I got to see both sides of it. So started that about 6 years ago. Then I went on to play professional hockey for 3 seasons. I played in North America and in Europe, lived in Budapest, lived in Finland, lived all over Canada and the States. So that's pretty cool. And then when COVID hit, I came on full time. I was kind of like my sign of like, all right, hockey is maybe in the back on the next chapter. So COVID hit and came on full time about 3.5 years ago at Wolfe. And since then, I've seen a lot of growth at the company and been a part of it. And I'm the chief investment officer here. So I started as a summer intern 6 years ago, and now I'm the chief investment officer. And then in addition to that, I'm also the president of Freedom Commercial Real Estate, which is a company that I created myself, which is going to run some funds that does cash flow specific investments across the country. So It's a little bit about me from a business side. And
that's pretty cool. Listen, no, it's like an amazing story of being an intern and then, becoming the boss, essentially, right? You start off and in a relatively short period of time, I must say. I mean, 6 years is not, it really wasn't. It was more like, 3-4 years, really, that made that happen all the time playing hockey full time. I mean, that's obviously not the whole time, but until COVID struck. I mean, that's amazing that you did that. And there's so much to unpack there. And I'd love to just go piece by piece because we had Kenny Wolfe on the show many, many, many moons ago, one of the first guests on Weiss Advice podcast. And I highly recommend everyone going back to that episode. If you can search, first of all, if you guys haven't listened to all of the 360 plus episodes of Weiss Advice, I highly recommend you doing that because these are just so many incredible interviews, but specifically Kenny's interview. I recall an amazing story about his 10-year-old at the time daughter reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I know we talk about this book a lot on the show. And it's just an incredible story about her reading the book on her own and then wanting to buy her first property, which she ended up doing at the age of like 10 or 11. So go and check that episode out. I highly recommend it. But more into that, I mean, Kenny has built an empire of commercial real estate, both in multifamily and in triple net properties. And you've been a really integral role in doing that and helping to grow that company, and which led you to start your own company. Like you said, Freedom
Commercial Real Estate.
Freedom Commercial Real Estate. So tell me about like, where was the impetus for you starting your own company? Because I do see a lot of times people who start off as like an intern or an analyst and are successful at what they do, they want to get a piece of ownership also, right? So it's oftentimes that people will have an entrepreneur spirit and want to go off on their own. But what was the process for you like?
Yeah, I've known since I was very young that I never wanted to work for anybody. And, I said I started as an intern 6 years ago, and I told Kenny in our very first meeting, I said, I don't ever want to work for anybody. And he was like, hey, me neither. But, so I think coming into this job and coming in full time, like I knew that my long-term goal was I wanted to do something myself. I wanted to spin off and learn as much as I could, get paid to learn. Kind of that's something that I was really big on. I'm getting paid to learn right now, and I'm young and kind of have some big aspirations. But Kenny's been an awesome mentor, and he's also allowed me to kind of grow into the position that I'm in. But I just always knew that I wanted to kind of do my own thing. And Kenny is kind enough to allow me to stay at Wolfe and as well start my own thing. So a lot of people I feel like don't have that freedom and don't have the support behind them that allows them that Kenny's given me. But Kenny's also allowed me to be a part of the ownership side and the GP side at Wolfe. So he's treated me very well. He's been amazing to me, and I have nothing but good things to say about him. And he's grown something great that I've been a part of, which is I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just an awesome sign of a leader who's someone who runs their own company and is not afraid of someone kind of leaving them and taking the knowledge. You get that a lot. People are they're uptight and like, oh, I don't want to teach someone everything I know because they're going to end up becoming my competitor. They're going to come out, doing something on their own. When in fact, you're empowering people. But the fact that he's wanting you're obviously an asset to the company and keeping you on while allowing you the freedom, right? Commercial real estate to go off on your own. That's pretty incredible. So tell me about what is Freedom Commercial Real Estate and what's the name about? How did you come up with that? Obviously it's a great word, but what does it mean to you? And then what are you actually doing with that company?
Yeah. So what I wanted to do at Freedom Commercial Real Estate was create funds that acquire cash flowing assets across the country that will allow my investors to have financial freedom to do the things that they love to do. So financial freedom is something that I'm really big on. I want people to have the opportunity to be work optional or be able to retire. And I think a lot of that comes through having multiple buckets of cash flow. So as opposed to kind of what we do at Wolfe, we're more on the value add side. We have a lot of value add multifamily plays, a lot of development deals where there's not a lot of cash flow for the first few years. We do offer some cash flow investments, but I wanted to create funds that are specifically cash flowing from day one. And then really the big difference I wanted to do in my funds is on refinance proceeds. Basically, I want to increase the value, whether that be through organic appreciation, but I want to reinvest that into the fund and have compounding growth through reinvesting refinance proceeds. So that's kind of where I feel like the biggest difference is going to be. So yeah, financial freedom is really important. And then freedom, kind of where that came from is just, financial freedom, but also I'm a Christian and freedom in Christ is something that's really big to me. And one of the verses that came to me was where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. So my faith is very important to me. And, I have freedom through Christ. I have freedom I want to have financial freedom, but I thankfully do. So those are two really big, important things to me. And I want to be able to offer those to investors. So that's where the name come from. That's what we do, cash flowing investments across the country. So that's
there
where
you
it
go.
came from.
Love to hear the meaning of names because oftentimes, people just pick like a random name out of the hat. But most of the time, you have people that there's a lot of thought that goes into coming up with the name behind their company. And, clearly you put a lot of thought into it. It means a lot to you. So I appreciate you sharing that. Now, for someone who played professional hockey, you have a pretty good face structure, It doesn't look like you've had too many broken noses or anything like that.
I kept all my teeth, which is nice. I have had my nose broken. I actually got in a fight. It was my first pro fight, and I got absolutely beat up. And he broke my nose, and thankfully it was covered by insurance. So I got a nose. I got a nose job. This is the Brad Pitt nose. They actually give you a book of noses when you go into the plastic surgeon. They say, "Which nose do you want?" No, I'm kidding. But I've had my nose broken. But everything else, I'm pretty fortunate and stayed pretty healthy.
That's pretty awesome. Are you still keeping up with playing at all? Not professionally, but amateurly or whatever.
Yeah, so I do still play for fun, and I like to stay fit and active. I actually do still play professionally, which is kind of crazy. But I played last season in Finland for about six weeks at the end of the season, came in for the regular season and the playoffs. And so I was able to do that. I'm probably going to play this season again. And really something cool that has just came up is I'm actually buying part of a professional sports team, professional hockey team. So I'm going to be involved on the ownership side,
That's awesome.
which is pretty cool. And yeah, so, that's kind of maybe the next chapter, but I love to play. It's my passion. It's kind of what I grew up doing, and I love it.
Sure. And it's incredible. So I never played professionally, obviously, but I did grow up playing hockey as well. So really a sport that has a lot of fond memories for me. And I could definitely see why it's so, such a huge passion. But the fact that you're, going in and buying a portion of a professional hockey team, I think that's really the next step, right? In real estate in general, you're buying properties, cash flowing, but there are opportunities to buy businesses and things like that where you can also make a lot of money in buying businesses, but it can also be a passion that you have. And it's amazing to see someone like yourself who, like I said, we started 6 years ago as a college intern, and now, being an owner of a professional sports team. I mean, that's pretty awesome. What league is it? I mean, it's not the NHL, obviously you're playing in Europe, right?
So it's the ECHL.
What does that stand for?
It's East Coast Hockey League.
East
so you
Coast.
have the NHL, you have the AHL, you have the ECHL, and then you have a couple leagues below it. So it's basically 2 steps away from the NHL. It still has NHL affiliates, so it's affiliated with an NHL team. I can't say yet because the deal hasn't gone through. But yeah, we'll have NHL players that are drafted playing for our team. We'll have, prospects going up and doing that. So this is actually the league that I played in for the 3 seasons in North America. So it's kind of cool being like, hey, I played against these guys and now I'm gonna own them. So it's funny. Never would have thought it would happen this fast. But I've just been very blessed. And like you said, 6 years is something that most people at my age wouldn't be where I'm at. And it's not a lot of my doing. It's not really any of my doing. I've just been very blessed. And I feel like God's just given me opportunities to do some stuff. And I've kind of just he's opened doors and I've just kind of gone through them. It's not
That's the key. That's totally the key. And I totally agree with that. I mean, it's really the opportunities that we are given, because nothing in life is on our own. And what really bugs me, I have very few pet peeves in this world, but one thing that is, if I would call a pet peeve, of someone who calls themselves like self-made, right? I'm self-made, which is just, in my opinion, and I don't share a lot of my opinions on the show, surprisingly, well, most podcast hosts do, but it's a baloney, right? There's no such thing as someone who's self-made. I mean, everything that we have is God-given. And not only that, there are so many people in our lives that have an effect on us and to teach us and mentor us. I mean, you've had so many people who have, helped you, I'm sure, in your hockey career. You had coaches, you had trainers, you had teammates that helped you and got you to where you were, right? There's no such thing as someone who's self-made. So that's just a little end of rant right there. But I appreciate that you sharing that, because, a lot of people think, okay, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And there's so much more than just kind of doing it on your own and being grateful and seeing where you've come from. And again, 6 years is nothing. I mean, it's crazy. And it's amazing to see, what can happen in the next 6 years.
Yeah, it's exciting. And I feel like the more successful people get, the more in their heads they believe that it was them. And I'm trying to stay rooted in my faith and stay rooted in the things that I know are true, and know that it wasn't me who got me here. Like you said, it was God that provided the opportunities, and God that provided a lot of doors, but also the people around me that allowed me to be successful and help me. So, but I feel like it does get harder as more success comes your way. And I think staying rooted in truth is what makes you stay rooted, and knowing that just humility is kind of a big thing. So
for sure. Yeah. Surprisingly, Zane, by the way, you're not the first professional hockey player that we've had on the show. Believe it or not. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's right. We actually had Stu Grimson, the Grim Reaper, if you're familiar with him.
I know the name, yeah. Stu
Grimson, he was like one of the most prolific fighters in the NHL in the 90s, basically. Like when I was growing up, like Stu Grimson was like every fight, he played for like 6 different teams, but he was an awesome player, played for a lot of great teams. But and he wrote a book recently called The Grim Reaper, and just, sharing his biography, his professional career, and about, becoming a fighter and what that role was like. It's an interesting role. It's like one of the only professional sports where you have something like that in it, where it's like encouraged. You have an enforcer, you have someone who's like there to kind of show people, what you should be doing, et cetera. Yeah. So that was kind of his role, but that's pretty cool. I'm curious to know from you, like what some of the role, because we've had actually several, not just Stu, but several professional athletes turned real estate investors on the show. And it's fascinating to me always to hear what are some of those, principles, or some of those, I guess, key tools that you took from your professional, sports
Yeah.
to business?
Yeah. I think, being an athlete in general, from a young age, there's a lot of characteristics that are instilled to you: hard work, punctuality, being accountable, working in a team environment. There's a lot of things that are beneficial for business. I think, when you start to get to the professional level, those are the people who not only had those characteristics, but like were great at them, fine-tuned their craft, spent the time, the extra time that people weren't able to spend, and kind of, great, like rise to the top because of the extra work or the extra amount of, dedication that they had. So I think less than things I learned in hockey, I think the characteristics that were instilled in me through being a high level athlete are what has made me, succeed. And a lot of that comes through, I have a pretty high threshold on work. And I think a lot of that is just like, I was so driven on hockey on just like, hey, this is what I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I need to do to get there. Kind of just having an end goal in mind and being like just laser focused on that is kind of what I've taken from hockey. I used to train 4 hours a day. And, that's like exertion on your body physically,
Sure.
that like outside of that, you got other stuff that you're focused on too. So it's like, to me, going to the office for 8 or 9 hours a day really is it's a cakewalk. So it's like,
when on top of that, you're still training and
yeah.
still playing.
Yeah, true. Exactly. So it's like, I think a lot of the characteristics and things that go into being a high level athlete are very important. And, for me, that's something that I look for in people I want to work with and have work for me. It's not exclusive, but when I see somebody who played high level sports, I'm like, okay, this person did what they needed to do to get to this level.
Right.
And a lot of those characteristics are very beneficial in business.
For sure. I mean, the dedication, the discipline, the teamwork, punctuality. I mean, these are things that oftentimes get overlooked, but are so critical to being a successful professional in any area, right? But specifically, I mean, sports, that's awesome. And I totally agree. Those characteristics are things that kind of can bring you to the top. Was it something that, and I'm just curious because most professional athletes, people who go into it, like their always goal is to like get to the highest echelon, right? I mean, is everyone playing in these leagues? Like, is their goal, like, I want to, make it to the NHL one day. I want to like be the superstar.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you're realistic with yourself, you kind of know your cap. I came into professional hockey as a 24-year-old rookie. So I kind of knew that unless my first year went really, really well, it's like, I'm not going to play in the NHL. I just wanted to keep playing the game that I love at the highest level I could. And it wasn't about playing in the NHL at that point. It was about continuing to do what I love and using it as an opportunity to build experiences. And that's why I went over to Europe, played over there. And, everybody's goal is to play at the highest level. It's like, why would you do something if you're not going to try to be the best at it? It's like, hey, if I'm doing business, I'm not going to do it just to own, one rental house. Like, I want to own 1,000, or I want to own 10,000 units as opposed to, one. It's like, if you're going to do something, you got to go hard at it. So
with that being said, transitioning to that, like, what are some of your goals for, obviously with Wolfe and with now Freedom Commercial Real Estate? What are some of those goals that you have in mind?
Yeah, I think at Wolfe, I'd like to make the company as great as I can make it. I want to be a good steward of what I've been given, and I want to help Kenny grow what he's grown and grow it as big as possible. And I want to be a good employee. I want to be a good worker, and I want to build this and what he's done as big as possible. So that's the first thing. And then at Freedom Commercial Real Estate, I want to grow that as big as possible. I'd like to have $2 or $3 billion of assets under management in the next 4 to 5 years. That's kind of a goal that I have for myself. And that'll come through various funds, some multifamily funds, some commercial real estate funds, through retail. And then I might get into industrial funds as well. So, long-term goals, really my long-term goal is to create a nonprofit organization that funds missionaries around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And what that looks like is I want to create a bucket of money that just keeps getting refilled through cash flow. And then that bucket can go and be used to fund people, missionaries around the world, to help the world and tell people about my faith and what I believe and what I believe to be true. So that's my actual goal. I don't have a number of how much I want to make. I don't have a number of how much, I really want long term. I just want to create something that will tell people about the truth that I believe in.
Listen, first of all, 4 to 5 billion $2 to $3 billion in the next 4 to 5 years. That's a huge goal. There are very, very few people in this world who have accomplished that type of growth. It can be done. We've seen Kenny grow almost nearly that fast in that period of time. Obviously, he had an exceptional team working with him and doing that. So that's something that obviously you gotta start building as well. I mean, taking those leadership qualities that you've learned from Kenny and finding the right people to help you grow your funds as well. That's going to come with time. And I feel like today's like the recap of the Weiss Advice because I keep mentioning a bunch of previous episodes. But what you said reminded me of Steve Libman. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but if not, I'd love to connect you with him because he also started something very similar. And he's grown, has $100 million fund currently. But one thing that they've done and he's implemented is taking a piece of the equity or of the profits or both actually, and having that going directly towards a charity, towards this missions or whatever it is that he's supporting and doing that. And I think that's just fascinating because oftentimes people think, okay, yeah, I'll give whatever 10% or, tithing and things like that after, but doing it and actually writing it into the contract, that actually a portion of this real estate belongs to the charities is just an amazing thing. Obviously it becomes a little complicated. So make sure to speak with your attorneys, how to do that and how to draft that. But it's fascinating because there's only a certain amount of money that a person can have and actually need to live off of. And really, I honestly believe anything beyond that, really, you should be giving as much away as possible because, amassing just money in the bank, it's not really going to do you any good. You can do so much more good by giving it away.
Yeah, exactly. I think to whom much is given, much is expected.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a lot of people that buy the things of this world and they're never satisfied by it. But
for sure,
you can have a lot of stuff that will make you happy and buy cars and vacations and homes that might make you happy, but you will never have true joy until you have faith in God. And true joy comes from that. But yeah, I feel like, with kind of my heart behind the missions and what I want to do is just, I feel like I've been given a gift and, I've been given an understanding of business and an understanding of how to create wealth for investors and basically how to make their money work for them. And I feel like I'm just being a good steward of the opportunities that I've been given. And if I wasn't doing what I'm doing, I feel like I would be turning away from what I've been given.
Sure.
And just trying to be faithful with the gifts I've been given. And honestly, tell people about what I believe, because if what I believe is true, then there's a lot of ramifications behind it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm passionate about.
Awesome. Well, we've heard, obviously you've had Kenny as a role model in many ways. I'm curious to know if there were any, professional hockey players that were like your role models kind of growing up or currently that like a couple of players which are like, okay, that's someone that, I want to be like.
I think less than hockey players, maybe I'd say football players. I'd say Tim Tebow. I'd say that guy was a guy who was on the biggest stage possible and was bold in sharing his faith. And, typically when you get on a bigger stage, you might see people get quieter and be like, hey, let's stick to business. Let's do that. Like this, this isn't about football, but he used his platform. He used his abilities to make known what he believed. And he was an absolute stud of an athlete. And he was one of the hardest workers ever and just a competitor. But, outside of that, he never changed. He was bold. And, I'd say probably him. From a hockey standpoint, I just wanted to play hockey and score goals. And, I was an offensive defenseman. So whoever was kind of the good offensive defenseman at that point, I was like, yeah, that's who I want to be like. But yeah, exactly. He's unreal. So exactly.
Ray Bourque was mine when growing up. I actually was born in Boston, lived there for the first 9 years of my life. And the 80s, Ray Bourque was like the man and like one of the best offensive defensemen like to ever play the game. So yeah, definitely can understand that role. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Awesome.
Very cool. Well, Zane, I want to transition now to what we call the final four. These are 4 questions that I ask all my guests. And the first question to you is, what's the worst job that you ever had?
So I've only had one real job and I've only had paychecks from 2 separate things. One of them was working for Kenny and the other was playing professional hockey. So I've had 2 pretty good jobs, but if I had to pick between one of the 2, I'd say my favorite was playing hockey. So I guess my worst job was working for Kenny, but it's awesome doing both. So
that's cool. You never had like anything as a kid, like nothing to teenager, like nothing.
My first job was playing hockey. That was literally my first paycheck.
That's awesome. Well, good for you.
My parents were awesome and they supported me and allowed me to focus solely on hockey. And, they probably had a little bit of crazy hockey parents in them and were like, we don't want you to be distracted from hockey. We'll pay for everything. So I was very blessed and very fortunate to be in
That's
a
cool.
situation where my parents didn't make me work. I'll make my kids work, of course. But yeah, that's where we were.
Awesome. Very cool. And second question is, what's a book you've read that's given you a paradigm shift?
My favorite book that really changed my life is called You and Me Forever by Francis Chan. And it's actually a book on marriage and relationships. And it talks about marriage in light of eternity and just having an eternal perspective on life in general and a marriage relationship. So that book really changed me and made me think about the things that are going to matter in 1,000 years, in 1,000,000 years. Like we're all going to die. We're mortal beings. And that book made me it changed my life on like, hey, what's actually important, what's going to matter, and just having an eternal perspective.
Wow. Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes. Definitely a new one. So it's always good to hear new books. Definitely going to check that one out. Third question, what is a skill or talent that you would like to learn? And this could be anything.
I want to learn to speak Italian. I love Italy. It's my favorite place in the world. And I think everybody over there speaks English, but it'd be nice to speak a little Italian and, be proficient enough to live over there for a little bit. So, ciao, bella.
There you go. I assume they have professional hockey in Italy also, right?
They do. Yeah.
So that's what you got to do. Just go play for a team in Italy and then you'll pick it up.
Easy enough. I probably should, honestly. Good thinking.
I mean, listen, that's the way to learn a language, in my opinion. And I speak 3 languages fluently, but is to immerse yourself in it. And you're not just going to like randomly immerse yourself in Italy, but playing hockey, you pick it up. Like I picked up Spanish. I don't speak Spanish fluently. That's not one of the 3. But when I was in high school, I played soccer, and in California, everyone but like, I think like almost 2 or 3 of the team, like Spanish was their first language. So like, so you picked up so much just from the game, just playing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Maybe I'll just move to Italy for a year or something.
There you go. Do it. Check it out. You'll get back to us on that. Fourth and final question. What does success mean to you?
I think success to me kind of goes off a lot of stuff that I've talked about. Is like being faithful with what I've been given, keeping that eternal perspective mentality of like what's going to matter, what matters in the end of it. I think, what I said earlier of like, there's not a number for me for success. There's not something that I'm aiming for. What I want to do is I want to give away all my money. I want my money to go to missionaries around the world, telling people about God and how God can change their lives, and God changed my life. So I think success for me is being a faithful steward of the gifts I've been given and using the gifts I've been given to tell people about the truth that I know. Awesome. And
Very cool. Well, I appreciate you sharing all that. It's just amazing to hear. And this has really been a great conversation. So I appreciate you taking the time today. Where can our listeners find you or reach out to you?
Yeah, I'd say the best way to reach out to me is via email. And that's just going to be zane@freedomcre.net. And that's my email. That's directly to me. And then we have a website, which is freedomcre.net. You'll see a lot of stuff there. And yeah, we'd love to talk to you. We're currently raising for accredited investors, and we buy investment grade tenants across the country. And that fund is cash flowing monthly distributions and will cash flow for years to come with monthly distributions. So if you're interested in that, shoot me an email.
Awesome. We'll make sure to put all that in the show notes for everyone to check it out. And Zane, thank you again for taking the time today. It's really been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And to our listeners, thank you guys for listening to this podcast all the way to the end once again. And remember, until next time, the best advice comes only when you ask. Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn, send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.